Morning, Shmulik. That's it. One second.
Bom dia, Rabbi.
Bom dia.
Hello, Yaakov.
All right.
Morning.
Give a knock over there.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 chapters of Rambam, Hilchos Melachim Melachim Isayim Prakim Dalet Hey and Vav. We are beginning with Perek Dalet. Perek Dalet speaks about the rights and the power granted to a king and certain specific rights that are granted exclusively to Melech HaMoshiach. Beginning with Perek Dalet. Perek Dalet has 10 halachas. The sugya that we are learning is based on Baba Kama Kufyu Gimel, Sanhedrin Daf Chav, and in many other places. Halacha Aleph. Reshus Yesh LeMelech, the king is granted with permission, Litain Mas Aloam, to levy taxes upon the nation, Litzracha for the needs of the nation, or for war. Let's not confuse this at all with that which we learned yesterday, that if someone rebels against the king has the right even to take their lives, but not to confiscate their money. That's in response to a rebellion. Here we're not speaking about a rebellion, that God gives a king the right to levy taxes, because of like taxes refers to head taxes, because of like mechas, he can affix duties on merchandise, we call the sale taxes and other types of business taxes. And furthermore, he is allowed to decree fines for people who violate the taxes. And here it could be monetary fines. That whoever doesn't pay the tax, yilakach memaynoi, or yahadek. Shenemar, as it says, va'atem tihiyuloi la'avadim. Avadim means he can levy taxes, that you're subservient, including your finances. Similarly, we have a pasuk that writes, lomas, that you will be servants to him, and you will be in service to him. Again, head taxes, business taxes, and the din of and whatever he legislates is the law. Everything that's written in Parsha Shoftim, right, in the portion concerning a king, Melech Zoicha Boy. Furthermore, halacha base. He can send throughout the territory of Yisrael, and he can find and the in other words, he can subscribe people to the service. Right? And he can employ them as soldiers to his chariot and to his cavalry. And he can even take from the people to stand as his honor guards. And he can have people that have to run in front of him, as it says, that the some all of this is a raya, that which we see that kings did, because they had the right to subscribe people to do the service for them. And he can take from the best of the people to stand as his personal guards. As it says, and the eschamoidechem yikach v'asal lemelach toy. Halacha gimel. We call balei umaniyos. He can take from any type of craftsman, kol mashut tzarech v'oisim lemelach for whatever type of help he needs, and they have to work for him. And here he has to pay them their schar. In other words, we're not talking about stam taking a person's life away, but he can decide for a citizen, you will be in my service. That means he can either, so to say, force buy it, or he can rent for it. You can rent it. As it says, Ve'es avdechem, ve'es shivchoisechem, ve'es bachureichem, hatoivim, ve'es chamoirechem, yikach, ve'asa, l'malachtoi. All of them are subscribed into the service of the king. Halacha dalet. V'chein lekeach mikol. Huh?
Conscribed.
Conscribed. Thank you. Where's Danny? V'chein lekeach mikol gvol Yisrael. He also can take from the territory of Yisrael, nashim, wives, upilakshim, as we'll define right here, the halachic meaning of a pelagish. Nashim means a woman who you engage with in marriage through eksuba and kiddushin. Upilakshim are women that are designated to be exclusively with that man, but b'loi ksuba u'b'loi kiddushin. Ela biyichud bilvat koina oisa. The word beyichud b'vad machlokas doesn't mean that you have to do the act of yichud, which is like chuppah really, or yichud means no, you just have to designate her. And umoteresloi, and the king is allowed to be with her. Says Rambam that the institution, if you want to call that, of a pelegish is something exclusive to a king. Avol hahedyet also the pelegish. The only other area in Torah where you find that a man can be with a woman without giving her kiddushin, without technically giving her kiddushin, because really halachically he already gave her father kiddushin, is ba'amay v'riyah b'vad achariv. In other words, when there is this phenomenon that a man has the right to sell his minor daughter, and there's a mitzvah on the buyer to marry her, since he gave money for her father, if he's going to be meyayet her, which means he's going to decide that he tells her, Hadei at mikudeshas li, without giving her anything, without giving her father anything, they are also married. Just to make it clear, dear, because really halachically we view the kesef of the purchase to be retroactively transformed into kesef kiddush. Unlike a pelegish, they're both similar, that during the act of yichud, of designation, no money is being exchanged. The man is not giving her money. The yeshloi lasos hapilachim. He can designate these pilachim also to be in the service of his palace. Which what service? To be the tabachos, to be the cooks, to be the oifers, to be the bakers, to be the rakachos, to be the perfumers. As it says, hey.
Why did it need to separate that out?
Because you have other areas like by the by the fast toyer that we'll learn soon, that there are certain tasks that one may not give for her to do. And here you could. No, it's she. Okay. Even though just like a man can ask of his wife to cook, so can the king ask of the pelagish. These are dinim of pelagish.
Oh, but over here it says that they can take, like the first one in Gimel, it says you can take, them to do whatever it is you need them to do.
Yeah, but here you're not designating them also to have a sexual relation with them. One might have thought that since you designate them to be a sending wife, maybe that's it. Halacha. He can force people that are fit to serve as officers. As it says, wow. Again, just contrasting this, that if someone rebels against the king, he cannot confiscate their money. There are limits to his power. And here we're saying the things that he could. If I understand this correctly, that the right for him to take property, right? Taking property without paying for it, maybe that's called eminent domain here in English. That's only for war. If it's without pay, because before we learn clearly that he can take anything he wants with pay, either to buy it or to rent it. Here he's taking it. And the yifshutu al makoymos elu im ein lahem mashayechlu ela misham. And if he has troops and the only resources of food is from your field, and this is a it's a one-time thing, then he can take all of the resources he needs from the country to feed his soldiers. And he gives pay. V'noisam demeya. Now the question will be, what's the chiddush over here? I'll tell you the chiddush, because before we were speaking about the king taking it for himself. Here he's taking it for the soldiers. He also has that right. That's what. As it says, before it was speaking about taking for himself, and now it's for his army. Halacha zayin. What we're learning now, don't confuse this with trumas u'maisos. We're learning now aside of Trumas Umaisas. After we tithe, that's Truma Gedoyla, which the average person gives 2%, and then you have Meiser Rishon, and then a Meiser Sheni or Meiser Ani. He is entitled to, guys, this is a side of the tax that we spoke about in the beginning of the Perek, to get 10% from the Zurayim, right? Min ha'ilanis u'min ha'behema. Shenemar, as it says that v'zar echem v'charmechem ya'asoy and v'tzoichem ya'asoy. Halacha ches. Now we're learning unique rights to Melech HaMashiach.
Is that like Meiser or is that like separate again?
I said separate again. And again, it must be separate from that which you mentioned in Halacha Aleph, speaking about head taxes and business taxes. Now we're speaking about California that which grows. The California taxes is much worse. It sounds like a lot. Halacha ches. He doesn't say you can take gas taxes. Let's start with that. There was no gas, doesn't matter. There's no such a halacha. Halacha ches. Hamelech HaMashiach noitel mikol ha'arotzi shekrev shem Yisrael chelek echad mishloish esrei. Interesting halacha, unique to Mashiach, that the territory conquered by the Jewish people under the reign of Mashiach will be divided not into 12 portions, one for each tribe. It's going to divide it into 13 portions, one for each tribe, and the 13th will go for Mashiach. And the davar zechoik loy ulevanov ad oilam. Halacha tes kol harugei hamelech. The rule is memoinam lamelech. V'chol hamamlocha shekoivesh. When a country, another nation is conquered, so then the king's treasures of the conquered nation also belongs to the melech. V'shar habiza sheboizazim. Other than the unique treasury of the other king, what about all the other spoils of war? So this is the way we divide it. Boizes and v'nois and lofanov. Everything is brought to the king. For who? The king, noitel machzes v'roish. He gets 50%. And the other 50% is divided into two parts. Machzes habiza chol kenoisa. V'chol anshe yatzava biyachad im'o'am ha'yosham ha'lakedim ha'machzes l'shamram. Between who? Between the army, between the troops, and what we call in English the home front. The home front is halachically as important as fighting in the battle. And they divide it equally. As it says, like the ones that stayed home. You have to appreciate what could happen if the people who don't go to battle don't hold the home front. And final halacha yud. Now, guys, we're speaking about Mashiach. Halacha yud goes back to all the other kings. Kol ha'aretz shekovish. Any land that's conquered, harehi shaloi. V'noisen la'avoda v'la'anshi ha'mochama kefi ma sheyirtza u'maniach la'atzma kefi ma sheyirtza. Unlike we learned before, again, halacha ches and halacha was specifically about how Mashiach will divide the spoils. U'b'chol elu hadvarim din of din. Whatever he determines how things will be divided is halachically valid. Ubakoil, in spite of the fact that the king has so many rights and powers, says Rambam, that whatever he does has to be done l'shem shamayim. And his purpose and his intent should be laharim das ha'emes, to elevate Yiddishkeit, and to fill the world with justice. And to break the power of the wicked, and to wage the wars of God. And this is the primary function, guys. When you see the word melech, don't only have in your mind the word king. Melech means government. Is lasois mishpat umulchamas. That's the purpose, to make sure that there's justice, and if need be, that we wage wars. War has to be waged under a government. Shenemar v'shaftanu malkeinu, the first shofet mishpat, and then the yatzel lefanenu v'nilcham es milcham moilteinu. And the way that Rebbe explains, just to make it clear regarding halacha yud, we're seeing that every land that he conquers belongs to the king. Hold on, didn't that Yisrael that was conquered by a king, right? Conquered by Yeshua, was it not divided to all the people? So there's a gavaldik halacha concept. Let me give you the words. There's something called bailus klalos, like a collective ownership. The collective ownership belongs to the king. Or you can say that collectively America belongs to the government of America. Right. And it doesn't contradict the fact that you own your home. It's even though every person was given Bailas Paratas, but let's go back with the first, Yeshua conquered the land. Yeshua representing the country. The land generally belonged to the king. And we also have it now, which is why every country is different, but the concept of eminent domain, that even though I own it, but there is prior to me owning it, it belongs to the Melech, it belongs to the Malchus, it belongs to the government. That's a good way of framing the ideas of the king owns everything that he conquers, in spite of the fact, let's go to the Holy Land, was conquered, and every year has their own chelik. Okay, let's move on, Pei to K. Pei to K, speaking more about the wars of the kings, Melchemes Mitzvah, Melchemes Reshus, and the specific prohibition of settling in the land of Egypt, and the awesomeness and the importance of living, or at least being buried in the land of Israel. This Pedic is based on Midrashim, on the Sifri and Ekev, Sifri and Parshas Kiseitze, and it has 12 halachas. Let's begin. Pedic Hey, halacha al. Ein hamelech nilcham tchila. Okay, the king has the right to wage war. The first wars that he must engage in is what we will call Melchemes Mitzvah, Mitzvah Wars, as the Rambam will define 3 types of wars that are called Mitzvah Wars. Melchemes Mitzvah, in other words, he cannot engage in Melchemes Reshus, as will be defined, prior to him waging Melchemes Mitzvah. Melchemes Mitzvah, number 1, Zu Melchemes Shiva Amanim. It was the initial conquest of the 7 nations that were living then in what the Torah calls Eretz Canaan, right, which is now Eretz Yisrael. Number 2, Melchemes Amalek. These 2 are offensive wars. And number 3, any defensive war. The Ezras Yisrael Mitzvah Sheba Aleim, that's called a Melchemes Mitzvah. And afterwards, if the king finds it fit, with many other preconditions, he would consult, he would get permission from the Urim Tumim. But then there's a concept called Melchemes Reshus, right? Optional wars. What makes something optional? Not because they are a threat to us. And by the way, preempting is not a contradiction to Melchemes Mitzvah. Preempting, because don't wait for them to hit you, hit them first, but that's to defend yourself. That's also Melchemes Mitzvah. So why would we engage in a battle if it's not to defend ourselves? In order to expand the borders of Yisrael, and to magnify its greatness and its reputation. This is something that may be done. Again, there are more conditions to when, and we have to have the Sanhedrin involved, but you cannot engage in a Melchemes Reshus prior to Melchemes Mitzvah.
So you have to get 72 Jews to agree. Got it. Never happened.
It happened a lot. Halacha base. To wage war, it happened more, very often.
So the Melchemes Shiva Aleph is done. There's no longer going to be a chiyuv.
That's correct. The Melchemes Mitzvah that Mashiach will have will be Amalek if there are still a biological nation of Amalek, and certainly you're talking about going on the defense against our enemies to make sure they can't harm us. That will be the first obligation of Mashiach. Melchemes Mitzvah, Einoi Tzorech Little Barashus Beis Din. You don't need to get permission from the Beis Din. Elom Yoitze Ma'atzmei B'chol Eis. You go out and you force people to join the war. Here we go. You need to get permission from the great Sanhedrin. Now that you are going to battle, that the king may go through other people's property. In other words, in the previous chapter, we spoke about the king needing to pay for the property that he's taking. And here he doesn't. No one can stop him. Guys, this isn't the context of war. In other words, he doesn't have to go around your vineyard. He goes straight through wherever he needs to go. He goes straight line. And he carries out the war that's necessary, or with the permission, Melchemes Reshus. Halacha Dalet. Mitzvahs Asay. Let's begin with the first of the Melchemes Mitzvah, which was what the Rambam calls, right, the Melchemes Shiva Amamin. And the mitzvah is Lahacharim. Lahacharim means to annihilate, to utterly destroy all of the 7 nations. As it says on Parsha Shoftim, Hacharim Tacharimim, a double lush. If some of any one of their nation comes into your hands, and we as the people did not kill them, as it says, and now Shuki for you, says Rambam, ukvar avad zichram. Now we should know that their memory has been obliterated, and the reason for that is, as the Gemara tells us in Sanhedrin, because Sancheriv, during the times of the first Beis Hamikdash, he created a bilbul in the whole world. He conquered the world, and anywhere he went into, he removed the majority of its populace and he moved them to other locations. So if anyone comes to you, that's called Kol HaPoirish, you don't know where he came from, Meruba Parish. Even if he came from a locality, let's say, that was never conquered and they used to live there, he's Mistama, not from the 7 nations. So the Rambam is basically saying that in the future, we won't be doing anything actively to fulfill this mitzvah. It was already fully fulfilled. There's nothing left of it. Number halacha, the mitzvah saseh. Second category of Melchemes mitzvah is la'abe, to destroy the seed of Amalek. Shenemar, as it says, timche ezecher Amalek, that we have an obligation to obliterate the remembrance of Amalek. Mitzvah saseh liskar tamen ma'asav haroyim ba'arivasa. It's not only do we have a mitzvah to wage war against them, but we also have a positive mitzvah to remember their evil deeds, specifically the way they ambushed us when we left Mitzrayim, in order to arouse our hatred of them. As it says, remember, now we have Kiyadua, right? It sounds like it's superfluous. Remember, don't forget. And the rule is it's not superfluous. It's two complete different mitzvahs. Zachar, as a rule, when the Torah uses the word Zachar, it means Zachar bepeh. For example, in the 10 Commandments, Zachar is Yom HaShabbos lekachay. So Chazal tell us in Pesachim, Zachreu bidvarim. Zachreu bidvarim. Remember means to speak about that which you are remembering. Loi tishkach means your heart. So Mepei Shmo Lamdu Zachar bapeh. And Loi tishkach is believed she'asur lishkoyach, his Avon and the Sina, it goes to us that we cannot forget our Avon Sina that we have to have against them. Halacha vav. Kol ha'arotzei shekoivshim Yisrael ba'melech al pi beis din. We're speaking here about a Melchemes Reshus. Harei zeh kibush rabim. We use the expression that it was conquered by the Jewish people at large, and it becomes incorporated in the land of Eretz Yisrael. Greater Eretz Yisrael. But when do we say that any word that was conquered by the government becomes mamish part and equal to Eretz Yisrael with its kedusha? That's only when so, for example, if you remember, right, Surya kibush yachid, that whole sugya machlekes Rashi Tosfos. But let's go with the approach. Since David HaMelech conquered Syria prior to fully conquering all of the land of Israel, that's why that conquest was not called Kibush Rabim. And that's why, as we learn, Midrabanan, you have to give Trumas U'Maiser. It's not Midoiraisa, because it's not considered part of the Holy Land. Halacha Zayin. Umutar lishkoin b'chol ha'olam. A Yid is allowed to dwell anywhere in the world, chutz mi'eretz Mitzrayim, other than settling in the land of Egypt. The Rambam now is giving the boundaries, the halachic boundaries of Eretz Mitzrayim, min hayom hagodol va'ad hamayrov, arba meyas parsa, arba meyas parsa. No, it's the total territory is 400 parsa. A parsa is around 4 kilometers, right? So that's 1,600 kilometers by 1,600 kilometers, right? Beginning from the Yam HaGodol, from the Mediterranean, proceeding west, Keneged Eretz Kush means bordering to Ethiopia, Ukeneged HaMidbar, and bordering to the desert. Guys, the desert means the Sahara Desert. Hakoil Osir Liyas Yashava. And then Rambam goes into details that there are no less than 3 places where the Torah says not to settle there. Number 1 in Parsha Shoftim, where it says some Moinei HaMitzvahs interpret this in a very narrow way, that you cannot settle Mitzrayim by going from Israel back to Mitzrayim the way we went from Mitzrayim to Eretz Yisrael. That's the Baderech Hazeh. It's not so much about not settling there, but it's about how did you get there. The Rambam does not subscribe to that. He includes it in all together. Number 2, in Parshas Kisavai, lo yisoisiv oid l'roisa, referring now to the land, not to the people. And number 3, in Beshalach, obviously there's a reason why the Rambam is going out of order. Lo ysoisifu liroisam ad oilam. And the Rambam makes it clear that the Alexandria, which was a huge settlement of Eden, the Gemara speaks in Sukkah about it, Sukkah Daf Nun Aleph, and the Gemara says, why did that whole community get destroyed? Because they violated this commandment. The Gemara says that. Bechlalo is.
We're going
to mention what the Rambam did in a moment in Halacha Ches. Halacha Ches. Muter lachzor le'eretz Mitzrayim. One is allowed to go to Egypt, l'schoira u'leprakamatya, right? To engage in trade and / commerce. Or if the people are going through Mitzrayim to conquer another nation. In other words, the Isur is not to travel through. The Isur isn't even to be there on a temporary nature to do business. The Isur is ve'ein asur ela lihishtakei hasham. And the Rambam adds ve'ein loiken alav zeh. Why not? Because the Isur is not to enter. What is your action? Your action is you're walking there, you travel. That in itself is not the Isur. The Isur is that when you are already there, you settle. When you're there already, you're not doing anything. So it's a lav she'ein bei mais. Once you decide to live there, ein bei mais. And this Shuki is where the Rambam is maramis, even though the Rambam, in his great humility, holding himself to even a higher standard, considered himself someone who's not complying with this negative commandment. Nevertheless, halachically, by the letter of the law, the Rambam obviously was not going to be breaking one of the mitzvahs. When the Rambam went to Mitzrayim, as we all know, the Rambam was running away from radical Islam. The Rambam's family actually went to Eretz Yisrael, right, from Spain, and they went to Morocco. And when the Rambam came to Mitzrayim, there the Sultan conscribed him into the service of the palace. That was not that was an oinus. That was not in direct violation of the law. Now the Rambam says,
Rabbi,
yeah.
Alexandria had a huge community that was there for years and years. I mean, the Cairo Geniza has more artifacts and it dates for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Guys, I know that those of us who just recently Sukkah Daf Nun Aleph on the base, read the Gemara. Exactly, Danny. That's the point. The Gemara wants to understand why did the community get destroyed there. The Gemara writes. The Gemara says they were punished because they lived there. The Yeroli Shemkavash Melech Yisrael Eretz Mitzrayim. Alpi based in the Rambam adds a big chiddush that if after we conquered the Shiva Samamin and we destroyed Amalek, right? Now we're going to want to expound the borders. Or let's go better. Egypt is such an enemy to the Jewish people that the only way to have peace from them is by conquering them. So once we conquer the land of Mitzrayim, now it becomes mutter. Individuals cannot go there. To go there when it's under the governance of Goyim, because as it says that Eretz Mitzrayim, and maybe Danny the Rambam is being the Ramas, maybe that when you have such a large community like Alexandria, at a certain point, it was considered like a Jewish city. I don't think that Rambam means that. Again, the Gemara says that they were punished. And again, to speak on another Gavaldik Avart of the Rebbe, we just mentioned the concept that Kol HaParush Miruba Parush regarding any individual in the world, that even if they come, you don't know if they come from the Shiva Samamim, they Kol HaParush Miruba Parush. But Kol Kavua Kamachzal Machzal. So the Rebbe is explaining, even though Sancheirib also was Mevalbal, the Egyptians, but a minority of Egyptians were left in Mitzrayim. So if you go to Mitzrayim, it's still considered a place that Shema Aseh Mikol Kolam.
Does when conquer the Eretz Yisrael, or expand the borders of Eretz Yisrael, or even Egypt, does it stay permanently or?
Stays permanently. I guess if we conquered it, let me go a different way. If it was conquered, then if another nation conquers us, God forbid, then the same way we got it, the same way we lost it.
No, but that's in Eretz Yisrael itself. What about
talking the same thing that we have to be there. We have to hold on to it. Halacha tes. Okay, so first of all, a Yid can live anywhere aside of an Egypt. And now halacha tes asur lotzis Eretz Yisrael lochutz la'aretz la'olam. If a Yid has the merit to be in the Holy Land, really it doesn't even say if he lives there. If he's just there, he may not leave the Holy Land Lo oilam, ella. Yeah, you love these words. Forever, but exceptions. Lil moitayda, or lisa isha, or lahatzel miyad ha'oiv dekechavim, or if there's some money that if you won't be there, you won't be able to acquire it, then you are allowed to be there. And then v'yachzer la'aretz. V'yachzer la'aretz means that when you leave the Holy Land, not to be in violation, your intent has to be to come back. Like all of that, it's Yisrael, the Yidden that live here in Los Angeles, all of them. That's the they come here with the intent to go back, even if they are here for quite a number of years, but they came here for lachzer la'aretz. Any type of business engagement is something that allows you to leave. Lishka means if you are in Israel, to leave with the intention of settling, that's asur. And here, even leaving with the intent of not returning is only, there is one case when it's permitted. Ella imkain chazak shamarav, if there was a tremendous hunger. How do you define a tremendous hunger? Which means that inflation reached a point that basic living expenses doubled. That if it's not double, it's asur. People have money. It's only that products became very expensive. If it's not mamish double, then you still can't leave. But if you're living in a place, maybe even the price mark on the food, on the basic staple items are not that expensive, but people don't have money. If the payers can be bezoil, but not only don't you have money in your pocket, but you cannot find a means of making a living. So then, of the prutim in akis, that type of depression, then go to any place where you can make a living. Now says that even in the circumstances where you are allowed to leave, either it's double the price, or there's no money for you, or there's a general depression. It's not midas chasidus. So people that we hold up to a higher standard should not do that. Of midas chasidus and machloin and kilyoin, right? The husband and the brother-in-law, right? Of Rus, right? The old, correct? The husband and the brother-in-law of Rus, shnei gedoylei hadoir hayu. No, I take that back. Right? No, Rus never married them. They left, and then no. And they married them, and then the beginning of Megillas Rus. Even though they left because of the great sorrow, it was hunger. But which is indeed why they passed away. And what was, just to add something over there, that there was a tremendous famine. They were the only family that left. That also has to do with the fact that they were punished. Okay, halacha yud says Rambam gedoylei chachamim hayemenashkin al tchumei Eretz Yisrael. They would kiss the borders. In other words, today you fly into Ben Gurion, but when you would travel then, you didn't fly in, you came to the border. So the moment they would hit the border, they would kiss the ground. Umenashkin avanel, they would kiss the stones. Umizgalgalin arafara, they would roll in its dust. Techenu oimer ki ratzu avodecha es avoneha, that your servants hold her stones dear, and they cherish her dust. Whoever lives in the land of Yisrael will have all the sins forgiven. As it says, a person should not say, I'm sick of living here, because no one will say that. Because no matter how difficult it is to live in Eretz Yisrael, everyone knows the upside. It's worth it. What's the upside? That because to whoever dwells there has their sins tolerated, forgiven. And another greatness of the land of Israel, that even if you don't live there, even if you only walk, how much? 4 amas. Furthermore, whoever is buried there in this chaper loy has her sins forgiven. It's as if the place in which they were buried becomes dear. Mizbeach, that brings kapara, brings their atonement. Shenemer, as it says, the chiper admasoi amoy. So there's a unique type of kapara that comes from the admas of Eretz Yisrael. Or in the reverse, you see the greatness of at least after life being buried there. Now, the Rambam says much better would be to live there and to be buried there. The ein doimo koilwalta michayim likoil tatoi la'achar misa. It's much better for a person to be brought there while they are alive than to be brought there after their passing. Nevertheless, became many gedolei chachamim. Right, we learned this not that long ago in the Gemara. Even if they didn't live there, but after the passing, they had their remains be brought there and say ulamad. Let's go back to Chumash from Yaakov Avinu and from Yosef Atzadik. Yaakov Avinu immediately, Yosef Atzadik after we left Mitzrayim, they wanted to be buried in the Holy Land. And final halacha Yud Beis says Rambam lo oilam yadur adam be'eretz Yisrael. Person should dwell in the land of Israel. And afilu be'ir shurubo evtikachavim, even if the options that are in front of him or her is to live in a city that the majority of the people there are idol worshippers, and that's better. Va'al yadur b'chutz la'aretz va'afilu be'ir shurubo Yisrael. Shekol ha'yotze l'chutz la'aretz. Whoever goes from the Holy Land outside is ki'ilu oived avodah zarah. Wow. As if they're serving idols. And as Chassidus explains that the Talmud Eini Hashem Alekecha Ba Mereishis Hashana is palpable today by Hashgacha Pratis. We, even people like us, can see a much higher level of revealed Hashgacha Pratis in Israel and in the Holy Land Gufa in Yerushalayim, more than in the rest of the world. And the more we live with Hashgacha Pratis, the more we acknowledge that God is the master of the world. When people walk away from that Hashgacha Pratis mindset, that's a certain, in a very refined level, it's like Avodah Zarah. There's a God, but there's a world. There's something other than God. Sheneman, as it says, that Ki gershunei hayoim mihistapeach menachlas Hashem leimoid leich avoid Elohim acherim. What's the moment you're driven out of the land? It's as if you're going to serve idols. Ubipurani Yisroel vel admas Yisrael loy yovoyu. Now says Ramam Kshem Shasal would say some artists l'chutz la'aretz. Just like a Yid should never leave the Holy Land. Listen to this. During the times of exile, one should not leave bubble. As it says, that the Jewish people are going to be brought to Babylonia, and the Shama Yid, there they should be. The Rebbe explains something beautiful. He says that we find in Eretz Yisrael two different and unique distinctions or characteristics. One is it's called Eretz HaKodesh. There's Kedusha there. And then you have the land that God chose. It's the chosen land. As far as the Kedusha aspect is concerned, it's unique to Eretz Yisrael. But as far as God choosing a specific place, God chose the land of Israel, which is why a Yid should be there. And God chose Bavel specifically to be the land that the Yidden are while they are in Golus. And the Rambam, unlike others, doesn't say that this refers that if a person is living outside Eretz Yisrael, but they're living in a country where you have a whole Jewish establishment, as it was then in Bavel, don't leave from there. That's not the meaning of the Rambam. There's a certain bechira that God, that's the pasuk in Yirmiyahu, Bavelo Yuvo v'shama Yiyu. And Hashgacha Pratis, we found that what happened in the past, that the real establishment of the Torah Shemapeh, as we have it, Taka happened in Bavel. Even though tragically, ultimately, it moved from there to Spain and to Europe. And we're not mechoyev to go there, but once a Yid is there during Golus, according to the Rambam, they may not live there.
So is America Babel today?
So according to the way that Rebbe understands the Rambam, no. Other people understand it doesn't only mean Babel. Like I told you, it means any established Yiddish place outside of Eretz Yisrael during Golus.
Rabbi, ostensibly.
One second.
Is all of Eretz Yisrael considered Eretz Yisrael now?
Sure. If it's the biblical, not everywhere, the biblical boundaries. Yeah. Not everywhere, though. Not a lot. Because the way Mashiach will conquer Eretz Yisrael is first he's going to conquer the land itself, and he's going to engage in Melachim Mitzvah, which is a defensive war, getting rid of our enemies. And we did not begin to get rid of our enemies. We began, but we have a long way to go. And then with the Rishus of a Sanhedrin, which we don't have today, if we'll expand Israel, it's going to be Al Pishav Yachad Yaakov.
Ostensibly, the same heterim for going outside of Eretz Yisrael are also available for going outside of Babel.
Going outside Babel, probably. Yeah. Okay, very good. Chevra, moving on to today's third chapter, Perek Vav. Perek Vav is going to be speaking about specific steps that we need to take prior to engaging in battle. I know we learn chitas. You're going to see that the Rambam, we're going to see in this Pedic, amazing, that even the mitzvah to annihilate Amalek, according to the Rambam, is not the way it sounds. I can't contain myself. According to the Rambam, any battle we engaged in, even Shiva Samamin, even Amalek, they were given an option to flee, and they were given an option to become subservient to us. And if they would have succumbed, if they would have acquiesced, then we would not have killed them. Even Amalek. Let's read Shitas Rambam. It's like, wow. Every year the same way when you learn Pedic Vav. The Pedic Vav is based on also a lot of midrashim, and we have 15 halachas. Let's begin. Halacha Aleph. Says Rambam, Ein oisen milchama in Adam ba'olam. There's no such a thing in Jewish faith of engaging in war. Ad shekoiden loy l'shalom. You have to first offer for the nation an opportunity for peace. Now, the word peace might not be the way you understand peace. It's going to be that they are subservient to us, but such an offer has to be made. We never stam attacked. And that is not only by Melchemes Reshus, right? Laharchiv Gevul Eretz Yisrael. Here, this is unique. Rambam. Ve'echad Melchemes Mitzvah. Melchemes Mitzvah, we learned, refers both to the conquest of the 7 nations, and even Amalek. Shneimar, as it says, and the Rambam is quoting a pasuk in Shemna, guys. We learn Chumash. Rashi writes on this pasuk, Melchemes Reshus. Look inside Chumash, Rashi. But the Rambam says, when it says in Pasha Shoftim that Kisikra Valid, when you approach a city, Lihilacham allowed to engage in battle, first and always, the Karasa Eleha L'Shalom, propose a peaceful settlement. Now, the Imishlimu, if they acquiesced, and part of that will be, and this is a very important detail, is that they accepted to keep the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noyach, Sheva Mitzvah B'nei Noyach, as we're going to learn Cheder in this series of halachas Pedic Tes, with all of their details, Paskins, the Rambam, Ein Horgen Behem Neshama. No one is allowed to be killed. However, they become subjugated, as we'll see. Shneimar, as it says, now there are 2 details. They're subjugated, and they will be in your service. The Rambam will explain what each one means. No, it's the peace settlement for them is not that attractive. But if they accept it, and they are Mekabel Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noyach, we cannot kill any of them. They end up living in the land as, we'll see, second-class citizens. Kiblu Aleim Hamas, before we define, if they agree to pay the taxes, but they did not accept this unique type of abdus subjugation, as will be explained, or the opposite. Has to be both. Now the Rambam explains. So what are these 2 details? The tribute is also an abdus. It means you're working here for the American government. You're paying tax. You're paying 90% to the government. No, it's 2 different things. Ha'abdus doesn't mean money. Ha'abdus means your status. Ha'abdus she'ekabluhu she'yiu nivzim u'shfalim lamatom. That they should be living on a lower level. V'lo yorimu reish b'Yisrael. In other words, they would never have any position which would give them the opportunity to have any authority over Yidden. Eliyu kevushim tachas yodom. This idea of not equality. That is avdus. It's a status. And now, what's the Mashiach Kablu? A lot. Who? That they have to be open to if the king will need either their service, beguf, or their taxes money, they have to be there. Keep going. He's speaking about avdus beguf, that you have to build the walls. The chizuk hametzudas, you have to strengthen certain fortresses. You need to have working people. Ubinyan arbain hamela, for building the king's palaces. Shneimar, as it says, v'zed devar hamas asher hela hamela shleima libnis es beis Hashem. Look at the beautiful order. And then the esbeisoi, and a place called Miloi. Big Machlokes, exactly where is the Miloi? It's a location in the Yerushalayim. The Eschaimas Yerushalayim, and the Eskol Orei HaMiskenois, and all of the store cities. It was King Solomon, when he conquered countries, he offered them the peace settlement, and they gave into it, and they were the people that did all the manual labor. Huh? Miloi is it's a location in Yerushalayim. There's a big machlekes where that is. Where's the Miloi?
What does it mean?
Who built it? Many people say it was a location that had a lot of steps going up. I saw there's a whole to do with Miloi. Google Miloi, you'll see a big machlekes. What is Miloi? But it's something that King Solomon built. And how did he build it? Because he waged battles, al pi Sanhedrin, and people agreed to become subjugated, and they were the ones that built it. V'yala shleima lamas oived ad hayom hazeh. Umebnei Yisrael linosan shleima eved. The Yidden were not told by the government of King Solomon to be the manual building laborers. They were inscripted Anshe HaMilchama, the Avadov, the Sadav, the Shalishav, the Sadirichbai, Ufarashav. Halacha base.
Brother, what's going to happen with the Medina right now?
Let's keep on going over here. Halacha base. Yesh lamelech lahasnois imam. Let's know. We'll read. You'll see. This will be put into place. The yesh lamelech lahasnois imam sheika chatzim amayim. Another type of tax. In other words, a tax that we spoke about on the first page today is there's a head tax, and then you have you have called in America property tax. Then you have business tax. Here, the king, when you conquer a country, you can tell them half of your wealth belongs to the government. Just as an example. Or the king is going to take all the land and he's going to leave them the metaltalin. Or the king is going to take, king meaning the government. Just always, you hear the word king, it's not a person. He represents the people, the government. In other words, the Yiddish Melech can oppose upon them terms as the king sees fit. But the point is that if they acquiesce to the terms, even, we'll see, the 7 nations, even Amalek, according to the Rambam, you do not kill one of them. Halacha Gimel. The Asr l'shaked bevrisam, if they acquiesced and you made a pact, from then on, Asr l'shaked bevrisam l'chazav lahem. You may not be, you cannot lie to them. Right, you cannot be untruthful to them. You have to keep to your terms. That's called the Ishlim. They said yes. So when you wage a war, you're going to even Mochanas Mitzvah. First, you would send out a letter and you would tell them, "Listen, Chevram, we are going to enter your territory." We're going to see in the detail. The first thing that we're told is, if you want to run away, run away. As we'll see soon, we never laid siege around the city. We're not allowed to do it as Yidden. We lay siege around 3 sides. Whoever wants to leave can leave. Whoever wants to stay can stay under the conditions of Hishlim. Lamas va'avaducha. Then ve'im lo yishlimu, or even if Hishlimu, both lilamas enter the avaducha. It's like I said, but they were not makabel sheva mitzvahs. Then we engage in battle. And what happens when we engage in battle? So guys, what we're speaking now is not about Amalek. This about allowing the woman to live, that's not Amalek. If we engage in battle. We kill all the adult males, not only the soldiers, all of the adult males. However, neither the women nor minors, even male minors. As it says, and the point that Amma wants to make is that not kill all the men, all the adults, because the word taf includes male infants under bar mitzvah. Now, that if we engage in battle because it's loy hishlim, we allow the women and the children to live. That is the mlechemes harashus shuhuim shar umas. Avol shiva amamin and the mocham against Amalek. Look at the Rambam's words. Shaloi hishlimu. Yeah. For people that need to be politically correct, Nebuch, they feel very happy with this.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. Then no one can be allowed to live. As it says, Kain Tasa L'chol Ha'arim, right? Akev. And then Shreiftim. Rak Ma'arei Ha'amin. Lo Yitzchai Kol Neshama. Yitzchai Kol Neshama, that's in Parsha Shreiftim. B'chein U'aymer Ba'amalek, Timcha Zecher Amalek. So Timcha Zecher Amalek is the Imloi Hishlim. Uminayin she'eina medaber ela be'elu shelo yishlimu. The Rambam is saying, the Rambam knew that he's not everyone is going to agree to him. How do you know? I mean, it sounds, you read the Chumash, it sounds loy sechaya kol neshama. The Rambam is saying it's only im loy hishlimu because it says shenemar loy hoysa id asher ishlima es Yisrael. Regarding the Shivas Hamamin, the fact is that other than one group of the Hittites, that the ones that were living in Gibeon, no other nation agreed to our peace offering. So therefore, Bepoyo, we engaged in battle and we annihilated them. Right? Why is that? Because Hashem did want for them not to be here anymore. So Hashem, like he hardened the heart of Parai, in other words, Hashem took away their bechira. Hashem hoisa, what lechazek es liban, lekras hamulchama es Yisrael, in order for us to be machlim them. Machlim means to be destroyed them. In other words, the fact he's quoting the pasuk in Yeshua that God hardened their heart. Why does it say that? That's to tell you that just to know the halacha that if they would have agreed, then we would not have been allowed to battle against them. We would have entered the land and we would have taken over that area, and they would have been lamas v'abaducha. All this is shita saram. Now, halacha hey, the Rambam is quoting from a Yerushalmi in Shavis. Nach pratim, what happened? What do you do to be when you offer a peace? Shloisha ksavim shalach Yeshua actually nichnas la'aretz. Yeshua sent. This is not one time. This is when you go into a land, you go into an area. There were 3 different letters that he sent. The first, this is what he told them: Shalach lehem, whoever wants to leave can leave. Everyone is free to go. The second letter was as we explained what yashlam means. No, yashlam means to make peace under the terms that we said above. And then and that's the power of a people, because you don't attack them, at the night. You don't have to ambush them. When you're very confident in the strength that God is giving you, you tell them exactly what you're doing. Problem is the people, as we know, that settled in Gibeon, that they tricked. Remember the whole story? That they dressed as if they came from a foreign country and they brought with them food, that they mamash made a bluff. It looked like they were from another nation. And all of that was to make a peace treaty with the Yidden. Why did they even have to do that? No, it's if, according to the Rambam, the whole din of loisechai kol neshama is only in lo yishlimu. So then why did they have to make that whole ruse? It answers that Rambam lefisha shalach lehem bechlal, because first Yeshua sent the letter to all of the nations and included these Gibeonites. And the first reaction was they ignored it. They didn't know that they would have been given another opportunity. They didn't know that. Had they known that, they wouldn't have need to do that whole ruse. They thought in other words, they thought that it's a one-time peace offering, a peace or a settlement offered to them. And really, Yeshua would have sent, there was like a general statement to all of the nations there. And then as we went from place to place, he sent it again. Now, the problem on the other hand is, hold on, so why did it bother us so much that there was a whole discussion whether we should honor the peace treaty, whether we should not honor the peace treaty? They were hishlimu. So the Rambam is going to explain what they ended up doing is that they never agreed to be lo masva avaducha. Being that we did not know that they were actually local residents, the agreement we made with them is that they can be equal citizens. That's why, if not for the oath that we took to them, even though we were tricked not to harm them, if not for that, then the Chilul Hashem that it would have created, Vitaka would not have honored it. And Vitaka came to the conclusion that if not for the oath that we took for them, we would have not kept our agreement. But what they ended up doing is not hishlimu. Hishlimu meaning that they become second-class citizens. They made a covenant, which really we swore to them that they'll be equal citizens. They'll live here equal to us. And for that, the Torah says, they should have been lamas and avadim. So and being that we were tricked, so really we made an oath. We took the oath on a false premise. The conclusion was that it would have created the Chilul Hashem. Chilul Hashem, I know that sometimes people say Chilul Hashem is only if something is being done in front of 10 other Yidden. Here, clearly not. Chilul Hashem means that the Goyim, the other nations, who knew that we made an oath, we took a covenant, we made peace with them in a way that they are equals, they wouldn't have known the details, or they wouldn't have focused on the details. They would have said that we did not honor our oath, and because of that, we kept it up. Everything we said above, L'Rambam, even clearly, he writes to Amalek, to the Shiva Amamin, you know which nations we may not send this peace settlement offering? To Ammon and Moav. As it says in Parshas Ki Seitzei, Leisidrei Shloimam V'Toivas. Amru Chachamim, Lefi Shenema V'Karas Elal L'Shalom. So therefore you would think Ammon and Moav came. Talmud Loimel Leisidrei Shloimam. Lefi Shenema Imcha Yeshuv B'Kirbecham. Batoivloi, Yochel Ammon and Moav came. Talmud Loimel V'Toivasam. They are the exceptions. Now, V'Afal Pi She'ein She'yalam V'Shloimam. Look at the Rambam. Even though we never offered this type of peaceful solution, if they would have proposed, don't kill us, we are going to subjugate ourselves to you, we're going to be Makabel Shem Mitzvah Noach, we're going to be subject to your taxes. If they would have proposed it, we also would not have been allowed to kill them. Wow. Halacha Zayin. Says Rambam, once we place a siege around the city, we never place a siege around all of, which is really what a siege means. We don't choke a city to death. Dafka only from 3 of the directions, and we leave a place for people who want to go out to get out. Whoever wants to escape with their lives. Now, we're not going to allow them to go out with their property, but we allow them to go out with their lives. As it says, a pasuk in Matos, that Vayitzbu'u al Midyan. This is the Milchama, right? That Moshe Rabbeinu did. We besieged. We made a siege against Midyan. Kasher tziv Hashem es Moshe. The way God commanded Moshe. So there's a hint. What do you mean the way God commanded? It means God spoke about making a siege. That's the source. The Piyash Lamdu. That exactly what did God command? Only from 3 sides, allowing a passage for people to run away with their lives. Halacha ches. Unique dinim during a siege and during a war. Ein. When you are besieging a city, Parshas Ki Seitzei, don't destroy its fruit trees, which was commonly done, especially since they would take from the local trees to make these battering rams. Don't do that from the fruit trees. Don't prevent the water of reaching these trees to dry them out. You're not waging war against nature. You're waging war against the people there. As it says, that's the big Baltashchis. The Baltashchis, according to the Rambam, biblically is regarding destroying fruit trees. And not only are you chayiv malchus if you cut down a fruit tree during a battle, during a war, during a siege, in any place. But you know how derech hashchasa with a destructive intent, that Rambam will explain what he means. Then you're chayiv malchus. But what happens if you want to cut it down? If this tree is destroying other trees, sometimes this tree is consuming so much nutrients from the ground that you can't have them all living. So one of them has to go. Then that's not called the derech hashchas. Or it's being masik someone else's field. Trees masik someone else's property. Fruit, cut it down. Or should dam of your cut him. Guys, you know what it means? It means that if the price of the wood is more valuable than the price of the fruit, it's not producing very little fruit, then you are allowed to cut it down. You're not destroying it, you're cutting it down for its value. If land is more valuable, which is what happens, you're building a house and there's a tree. We are careful beyond the letter of the law, and we never cut down a fruit tree. But you can get someone else to cut it down for you, because it's not called derech hashchas. And as we'll see in a moment, the Shita Sarambam, that Bal Tashkis, the way we apply it so broadly, is really a midrabanan, which is very important. But the Doiraisa of Bal Tashkis is regarding a fruit tree. Halachates, Kol Lil Sadak, any non-fruit bearing tree, Mutar Lakutz Oisa, you are allowed to cut it down, even if Einot Tzarachle. Now, guys, again, we just said, and we'll see clearly that the Rambam holds Bal Tashkis is a very broad rabbinic prohibition. So when the Rambam says you can cut down a non-fruit bearing tree, he doesn't mean stam. That's also called midrabanan baltashkis. It means that we can be a lot more lenient. We don't have to keep the rules narrow, that the way the Rambam said in halacha ches. If there's there's some reason you want to make a path here and it's in your way, that's also enough. If a fruit tree is very old and therefore like us, it's can't producing anymore. It's not worthwhile. So then already it becomes halachically like a ilan sarak, and therefore umuta lekutzai. against you can be a lot more lenient. Now, what's the pshat? It's not producing enough, so the Rambam gives specifics. But it's already enough for you not to be allowed to cut it down. It's still considered a fruit tree. Imagine from a whole olive tree, only a roiva hakav. Quarter of a kav is around, let's say, 52 ounces. It's time to know that the olives were very expensive. It has to do also with the value of the time. That since olives were that expensive, even though it's only a roiva hakav in every season, it's already considered a fruit tree. Or videkal, a palm tree, shuoisa, only one kav of tamarim, ulo yikutseno. Halacha yud. Now we are broadening the baltashas. Whoever breaks utensils, or whoever rips garments, or v'hoides binyan destroys buildings, or v'soisamayman, you stop up, you plug up a spring, or enduma abid machalis, or if you destroy food, derech hashchasam, with destructive intent, you are violating loy tashchis, which is the pasuk. But the Rambam holds all of these is midrabanan. Halacha Yud Aleph. Guys, we are reading the Rambam according to the Girsa of the Kesef Mishnah, because many of you will have the Girsa and the Rambam will be contradicting what he himself wrote elsewhere, and the Kesef Mishnah, to reconcile that, is going to read in Halacha Yud Aleph these words. That you can lay siege to non-Jewish cities 3 days or earlier prior to Shabbos. In other words, we may not initiate a siege if you don't have 3 days until Shabbos, because even the winning side of the army, when you lay a siege, you're not miyusha for Shabbos. And we're not speaking about a defensive war that you have to right away do it for defensive. You do it when you need. If there's no difference whether you lay a siege right now or if you lay a siege next week, so in honor of Shabbos, only do it if you have at least 3 days prior to Shabbos. That's to lay the siege. But once you already laid the siege, we have no such restriction vis-a-vis Shabbos when it comes to actually engaging in battle. But even on Shabbos, and this even on Shabbos is not only Melchemes Mitzvah, even Melchemes Rishon. Once you come to that point, then there's no Shabbos. Halacha Yud Beis. What about camping? The troops are going from one area to the other. They have to encamp somewhere. So Kishachoinim, they have the right to pitch camp anywhere they find it important, anywhere they want. Another, then if a soldier, God forbid, gets killed during a war, the Makam Sheyipol, wherever he falls in battle, that is where he is to be buried. If you remember, Yeshua made 10 enactments. One of them is Meis Mitzvah, that if a person who we find is not living and we don't know who his or her relatives are, not only is it incumbent upon even a Kohen Gadol, if he's the only one available to bury, but where they found him. The details we learned in the Gemara, if it's on the road, right off the road, but to bury over there. And a soldier that falls in an army is like, during a battle, is like a Meis Mitzvah. Halacha Yud Gimel, other leniencies regarding army camps. The 4 leniencies that are permitted, as we'll see, it's basically midrabanans, and because of hefker, based in hefker, money issues. Let's go. Number 1, what's the rule? If you buy produce from what we call the Am Haaretz, midrabanan, you have to repeat and take off some of the tidings. It's a bit complicated. We'll learn it another time. An army troop, an army camp, they buy produce from an Am Haaretz and they can eat it. Number 2, washing your hands prior to eating bread, they are exempt of keeping. Guys, my machreinim, so also a midrabanan, that's where Chazal say, Chamira sakanta me'isuda. And my machreinim is also connected to Malach Sudoimus, that they're not exempt from that. But my mishreinim,
it's not talking about water for the vegetables?
No. Washing your hands before you eat bread.
What's the Isura?
What?
What's the Isura? You said...
No, Isur is midrabanan. Shlomo Melech says that you have to wash your hands. Violating Takana Shleima is an Isur. My machreinim is also not to become blind. That's called Chanira Sakanta Me Isur. So you see that...
My Mishanim is not considered Sakanta.
No, my Mishanim is not do Sakanta. No, it's all... Remember the whole thing about the Kahanim. The Kahanim, that they should be in the mode, remembering of not eating, they cannot eat truma, because Shtam Yadayim Ashniyas, and truma can become tamei on the level of a shlishi, they become puzzle. Number 3, now guys, number 3 is already theft related. But first of all, again, one of the 10 takanas Yeshua made is that if there are certain types of branches that when we find, even on someone else's property, certain types of we can take for our own fireplace. It became everyone's ownership. Now, army has even more rights towards fuel. Even mitzvah telushin, if you find them already cut down, and the evation dried out, that means someone cut them. Even though everyone has the right, based on takanas Yeshua, to cut them, but someone else cut them, someone else dried them, here they can take it. It's not hefka bez and hefka. No, today we say they have the right for fuel. They go take gas from the gas station. And number 4, now guys, it's important. Other than in money issues where hefka bez and hefka, all of these leniencies are only on rabbanans. So guys, carrying from a reshus harabim to a reshus hayachid is an isur d'oraisa. No heter can be given. But as we learn in Masechtas Eruvin, if a place was physically closed off with mechitzas, so it's halachically a reshus hayachid. Elama, again, King Solomon, you cannot carry from my tent into the area that's common area, even though it's both reshus hayachid. For that, you have to make an eruv chatzeiros. They don't have to make an eruv chatzeiros. P'turim elav eruv chatzeiros v'machim. Ela metaltlin ma'oil oil. But the Rama makes it clear, but that's only if that entire larger area was encircled with a halachic mechitza that's 10 tvachim tall. Today you can make it suras pesach, what we call an eruv, right? With all of the pratim, even though that normally you have to make an eruv chatzedas on top of the physical eruv. And this wall that you have to build, the ein mechitza pechusa ma'asara, which is why you have to have at least 10 tvachim height. Not only were they given this exemption if they are going to engage in battle, but if they are returning from battle, from all of the above. All right, and there's a sakana connected to all of them. No, these restrictions were generally taken off because they have more freedom. So they're not focused on these details, and if that were to happen, they could be in danger. Halacha Yudala, let's go. The final 2 halachas speaks about that people who went to battle, during battle, a person can lower his or her standards of being a human being. You're killing people. So the Torah makes a specific mitzvah regarding how we would relieve ourselves. That there's an obligation for soldiers to build a latrine outside the camp. They should relieve themselves with dignity, with details. For also, they cannot relieve themselves in the camp. Or stam al penei hasada b'chol but to go anywhere out there in the field. Ella mitzvahs asay l'saken shom derech miyuchedes lipan derech. Guys, doesn't mean a derech. Derech doesn't mean a road. It means a latrine, a location, a designated location. Shneimar it says v'yod tihi yalocha michutz lamachim. And on top of that, halacha tezvav the chein mitzvah asay. Just like soldiers, everyone has a weapon on them. So they had on their weapon belt, they had with them a little shovel. So wherever they're going to end up relieving themselves, they should be able to cover it over. And that has a very deep psychological effect on a person. You're carrying with you, be a mensch. That even when they're going, using the latrine, no, don't think that since you are in the latrine, it can be disgusting, what's called the porter potty. No, over there, today flush. That's what it means. The yachbarba, dig prior to relieving yourself, then v'yapana, and then put the earth back on top of it v'yachasa. Shenemar as it says, v'yosei ti alocha al azeinecha. This spike should be amongst your other weapons. And this is not only when we would travel with the Holy Ark. If you remember, guys, Shkolim, which is really Yerushalmi, we had this whole machlokes, whether we had 1 ark, whether we had 2 arks. Now we know that there was only one time that we went out with the ark that had in it the luchais that were unbroken. But there was a shita that holds that every time we went to battle, we would go out with an aron that had in it the shivrei haluchas. If you remember the sugya in Shkolim. So the Rambam wants to make it clear that this higher level is not only when we went out with the Aron Kodesh. Therefore, there has to be a higher level of hygiene. Even if we didn't go with the Aron. Shneimar, because Yidden are always obligated. V'hoya machanecha kadosh. And Hashem
Thank
should
you,
help
Rabbi.
that the streets of Los Angeles would be cleaned up. When you think about this, it changes the society. All right, Chavra Moededik, to be continued.
Shkoyach.
Wow.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Rabbi. Nice.